I am Remi Jurmain with my Black African Diaspora World News of today, December 18, 2025. From the Netherlands, Europe. Trump tries new trick to push the United States toward war using fentanyl fear. Source: The Young Turks. President Donald Trump has introduced a new executive order in which he claims that fentanyl should be officially classified as a weapon of mass destruction. According to Trump, this designation is meant to address the devastation fentanyl has caused across the United States. However, critics argue that the real purpose of this move is not public health, but creating a legal and political justification for military action against Venezuela without congressional approval. Legal experts and analysts have made it clear that this executive order does not grant the president any new powers. Congress has not authorized military strikes against Venezuela, and simply labeling fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction does not change that reality. The order is symbolic and carries no legal force. While fentanyl has undeniably harmed many American communities, multiple reports confirm that Venezuela has virtually nothing to do with the fentanyl trade in the United States. The primary sources of fentanyl entering the country are China and Mexico. Venezuela is responsible for only a minuscule amount of cocaine trafficking to the United States and has no meaningful role in fentanyl distribution. Trump has claimed that between 200,000 and 300,000 Americans die each year from fentanyl overdoses. This claim is false. According to official data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, fentanyl caused roughly 48,000 deaths in the most recent reporting year. While that number is still tragic, it represents a significant decline of approximately 27% compared to the previous year. It is also important to note that fentanyl is not the only drug contributing to addiction and overdose deaths in the United States. Methamphetamine, which is also trafficked primarily through Mexico, has caused severe addiction and mental health crises nationwide. Yet no one is calling for war with Mexico, highlighting the inconsistency in the argument being made against Venezuela. Since the year 2021, more than 250,000 Americans have died from fentanyl overdoses. This confirms that fentanyl is a serious public health issue. However, it has absolutely no connection to any military conflict involving Venezuela. CNN legal analyst Elie Honig has explained that fentanyl does not meet the legal definition of a weapon of mass destruction. Under federal law, weapons of mass destruction are typically explosive devices, chemical agents, biological weapons, or tools designed for mass casualty attacks. Declaring drugs to be weapons of mass destruction has zero legal impact. Judges, not presidents, determine how the law is applied. Honig compared Trump's claim to declaring a slingshot a firearm, which does not make it legally true. Trump is not the first political figure to attempt this framing. In the year 2022, a bipartisan group of attorneys general urged then-President Joe Biden to classify fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. This demonstrates that the idea is not limited to one political party, but rather reflects a broader failure among political elites. Commentators on the Young Turks pointed out the absurdity of selectively labeling fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction while ignoring other deadly forces in American society. Tens of thousands of Americans die each year due to lack of health insurance. Chronic liver disease caused by alcohol kills over 50,000 people annually. Automobile accidents claim hundreds of thousands of lives over time. Heart disease remains the leading cause of death in the United States, killing hundreds of thousands every year. Yet none of these are treated as national security threats requiring military intervention. The amount of fentanyl entering the United States from Venezuela is effectively zero. Therefore, the number of Americans dying from Venezuelan fentanyl is also zero or near zero. The argument that Venezuela poses a fentanyl-related threat collapses under basic scrutiny. The discussion then turned to what critics call the uniparty, a political system in which both Democrats and Republicans serve powerful donors, rather than the public. In the case of Venezuela, oil companies, defense contractors, and foreign policy interests all stand to benefit from regime change. According to the hosts, this explains why both political parties have flirted with the same talking points. The segment also examined Venezuelan opposition figure Maria Corina Machado, who has received international praise despite openly advocating for regime change backed by foreign intervention. She has framed military action as an act of love and a path to peace, a claim critics find deeply contradictory. The hosts questioned how someone can receive a peace prize while promoting war. The report further highlighted statements by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, who claimed that military actions against Venezuelan fishing boats saved hundreds of millions of American lives. This claim is mathematically impossible, as the total population of the United States is far smaller than that number. Critics described these statements as insulting to the intelligence of voters. The overall conclusion of the segment is clear. Labeling fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction is a recycled propaganda tactic reminiscent of the false claims used to justify the Iraq War. It is designed to manufacture fear, bypass democratic processes, and push the country toward another unnecessary conflict that benefits powerful interests rather than ordinary people. The hosts warn viewers not to fall for what they describe as a classic bait and switch. There is little public support for a regime change war in Venezuela, and the justification being offered does not hold up to facts, law, or logic. My next African world news is Nigeria issues formal apology to Burkina Faso over airspace violation. Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Nigeria has formally apologized to Burkina Faso following the violation of Burkinabe airspace by a Nigerian military aircraft, an incident that drew condemnation from member states of the Alliance of Sahel States. Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Maitama Tuggar, traveled to Ouagadougou on Wednesday, the 17th of December, 2025, to deliver the official apology. He was received by Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, to whom he conveyed Abuja's regret over the incident. Speaking after the meeting, Tuggar acknowledged that the airspace breach resulted from administrative failures. He stated that irregularities were identified in the flight documentation, particularly regarding authorization to enter Burkinabe airspace. He described the incident as unfortunate and expressed Nigeria's sincere apologies. The Nigerian foreign minister also confirmed that discussions addressed remarks made by a leader of a Nigerian political party who had issued disparaging comments about the incident. Tuggar said those comments stemmed from a misunderstanding of the situation. Carrying a message of solidarity and brotherhood from Nigerian President Ahmed Bola Tinubu, Tuggar praised Burkina Faso's recent progress in its fight against terrorism. He reaffirmed Nigeria's commitment to strengthening cooperation with Burkina Faso to improve regional security. Both sides discussed multiple security-related issues, with a particular focus on counterterrorism efforts and the need for closer collaboration to address shared threats across the region. Nigeria also commended what it described as the spirit of brotherhood shown by Burkinabe authorities in their handling of the aircraft's occupants, who remain on Burkinabe territory. The visit appears to have helped ease diplomatic tensions, reinforcing dialogue and cooperation between the two neighboring countries amid broader security challenges in the Sahel. Source: Africa News. Additional source: Joel Cohen. My next news is 50 days on, Jamaica struggles to rebuild after Hurricane Melissa's unprecedented destruction. Jamaica, 50 days after Hurricane Melissa tore through Jamaica, the country continues to face immense challenges as recovery efforts struggle to keep pace with the scale of devastation left behind. According to Dennis Zulu, United Nations resident coordinator for Jamaica, the Bahamas, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, and the Turks and Caicos Islands, current estimates place total damage and economic losses between $8 billion and $15 billion United States dollars. This represents nearly 1/4 of Jamaica's gross domestic product, marking one of the most severe disasters in the nation's modern history. Communities left exposed. Entire communities remain fully exposed, with at least 120,000 buildings having lost their roofs. The majority of these structures are located in southwestern Jamaica, leaving tens of thousands of families vulnerable to the elements. Hurricane Melissa caused what the United Nations described as prolonged and cascading disruptions to essential services. Western parishes were left without electricity for weeks, severely impacting daily life, healthcare delivery, and economic activity. The education sector has also been deeply affected. Many children remain out of school due to extensive damage to educational facilities. Approximately 450 schools, nearly 2/3 of all institutions nationwide, have reported significant impacts, including roof loss, structural failure, and other serious damage. Unprecedented scale of destruction. The tourism and agriculture sectors, long considered the backbone of Jamaica's economy and major sources of employment, have suffered extensive damage. Thousands of jobs and livelihoods are now at risk, adding further strain to households already struggling to recover. Dennis Zulu emphasized that the scale of destruction has been unprecedented, reversing years of development progress in a country that had been firmly on a positive social and economic trajectory prior to the hurricane. Despite the challenges, the United Nations continues to work closely with the government of Jamaica, national institutions, civil society, and international partners to deliver life-saving assistance to the most vulnerable communities. Immediate recovery priorities. Recovery efforts are currently focused on restoring health services to safe and fully functional operating levels, supporting the education sector as schools prepare to reopen, and assisting communities that still lack access to essential services. Additional priorities include repairing and reconstructing homes, roads, and critical infrastructure, restoring livelihoods through targeted support for small farmers, fishers, and micro and small enterprises, strengthening the agriculture sector to improve food production and rural employment, and supporting the tourism industry as a key employer and source of foreign exchange. Authorities and international partners have stressed that recovery efforts must be inclusive, climate resilient, and risk-informed to ensure that Jamaica rebuilds stronger and better than before. Source: Caribbean News Global. My next news is: Guyana accelerates financial inclusion and economic empowerment. Source: Caribbean News Global, December 18, 2025. Georgetown, Guyana. In a major step towards modernizing Guyana's financial system, President Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali announced that over 600,000 Guyanese are now integrated into the country's formal banking sector. Speaking from the Arthur Chung Conference Center, the president outlined the government's economic and social agenda for the next 5 years. We firmly believe that everyone should have equal access to participate fully in our economy, beginning with the fundamental ability to open a bank account. That is why we drastically simplified the requirements for opening accounts, President Ali stated. These simplified procedures are already operational, and the number of bank accounts has grown by more than 65,000 since 2020. Online banking is now available at 4 commercial local banks, easing access for citizens, including those in the hinterland regions. To further modernize the financial system, President Ali announced the creation of a junior stock exchange. This initiative aligns with the People's Progressive Party/Civic, PPP/C, administration's commitment in its 2025 manifesto to foster a more inclusive financial system that empowers all Guyanese to participate in saving and investment opportunities. The government also unveiled a transformative plan to support small and medium enterprises, SMEs, through the Guyana Development Bank. SMEs will have access to zero collateral loans of up to $10 million. Microbusinesses will be eligible for loans of up to $3 million with zero interest. Through a co-investment mechanism, businesses can access an additional $7 million at preferential interest rates, unlocking total financing of up to $10 million. The SME Development Bank is expected to be fully operational before the end of the first quarter of 2026, with an initial injection of $200 million from the government. Youth, women, and persons living with disabilities will be prioritized in this program. In the past, thousands of young Guyanese would have been denied access to financing for lack of collateral or a business plan. We no longer have to worry about that, President Ali said. To ensure that citizens are prepared to leverage these opportunities, the government will soon appoint a technical team to assist aspiring entrepreneurs in developing sustainable and comprehensive business plans. This will be complemented by mentorship programs and financial literacy initiatives to help Guyanese save for future investments. The president's announcement marks a significant step in transitioning Guyana to a modern, digitally driven economy, with expanded access to banking and investment opportunities for all citizens. My next news is: Government of Dominica seeks clarification from United States on presidential proclamation. Source: Caribbean News Global, December 17, 2025. Roseau, Dominica. The government of the Commonwealth of Dominica has formally written to the President of the United States seeking clarification and urgent dialogue following a presidential proclamation issued on 16 December 2025. The proclamation announced partial restrictions on the entry of Dominican nationals into the United States. Dominica reaffirmed its respect for the sovereign right of the United States to protect its national security and public safety, noting that the country shares those objectives. However, the government expressed concern over the inclusion of Dominica in the proclamation despite the country's extensive cooperation with United States authorities and the implementation of significant reforms to its Citizenship by Investment (CBI) program. Over the past several years, particularly throughout 2024 and 2025, Dominica engaged closely with United States officials through multiple channels. These included the Office of the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Embassy of Dominica in Washington, District of Columbia, and in coordination with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank on behalf of Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, member states. These engagements addressed all concerns raised by the United States regarding CBI operations. On 14 October 2025, Dominica became the first OECS member state to enact comprehensive CBI legislative reforms. The reforms included enhanced residency requirements, stricter controls on name changes, strengthened due diligence and background checks, increased financial transparency, and the establishment of an independent regulatory authority to ensure the program operates at the highest international standards. The government emphasized its commitment to maintaining close cooperation with United States authorities and called for urgent dialogue to clarify the proclamation's implications for Dominican nationals and the nation's ongoing efforts in maintaining rigorous international standards. My next news is: United States expands entry restrictions on multiple countries to strengthen national security. Source: WhiteHouse.gov, December 18, 2025. Washington, D.C., President Donald J. Trump signed a presidential proclamation to expand and strengthen entry restrictions on nationals from countries with demonstrated, persistent, and severe deficiencies in screening, vetting, and information sharing. The move is aimed at protecting the United States from national security and public safety threats. The proclamation maintains full restrictions on nationals from the original 12 high-risk countries identified under Proclamation 10949: Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. In addition, full restrictions have been imposed on 5 new countries based on recent assessments: Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, South Sudan, and Syria. Individuals holding Palestinian Authority-issued travel documents are also now subject to full entry restrictions. Full restrictions have been applied to 2 countries that were previously under partial restrictions: Laos and Sierra Leone. The proclamation continues partial restrictions for nationals from 4 of the original high-risk countries: Burundi, Cuba, Togo, and Venezuela. Turkmenistan, which has engaged productively with the United States and made significant progress, now has its non-immigrant visa restrictions lifted, though immigrant entry remains suspended. The proclamation introduces partial restrictions on 15 additional countries: Angola, Antigua and Barbuda, Benin, Côte d'Ivoire, Dominica, Gabon, the Gambia, Malawi, Mauritania, Nigeria, Senegal, Tanzania, Tonga, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Exceptions apply for lawful permanent residents, certain visa categories, and cases that serve U.S. national interests. Rationale for restrictions: the proclamation targets countries where insufficient vetting, lack of reliable civil documents, and weak law enforcement coordination create risks for U.S. national security. Many of the restricted nations experience widespread corruption, unreliable civil documentation, and high visa overstay rates. Some permit citizenship by investment schemes that bypass screening requirements, while others have unstable governance or active terrorist presence. Full suspension justifications: selected countries: Burkina Faso, high terrorist activity, B1/B2 visa overstay rate of 9.16%, F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 22.95%. Refusal to repatriate removable nationals: Laos, B1/B2 2 visa overstay rate of 28.34%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 11.41%. Refusal to accept removable nationals. Mali. Armed conflict widespread. Terrorist operations unrestricted in certain areas. Niger. Terrorist kidnapping threats. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 13.41%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 16.46%. Sierra Leone. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 16.48%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 35.83%. Non-cooperation on removable nationals. South Sudan. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 6.99%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 26.09%. Refusal to repatriate nationals. Syria. Lack of central authority for civil documentation. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 7.09%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 9.34%. Palestinian Authority documents. Weak local control and active terrorist groups prevent proper vetting. Partial suspension justifications. Selected countries. Angola. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 14.43%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 21.92%. Antigua and Barbuda. Citizenship by investment without residency requirements. Benin. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 12.34%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 36.77%. Dominica. Citizenship by investment without residency requirements. Gabon. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 13.72%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 17.77%. The Gambia. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 12.70%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 38.79%. Refusal to repatriate nationals. Malawi. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 22.45%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 31.99%. Mauritania. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 9.49%. Limited government presence complicates screening. Nigeria. Radical Islamic terrorist presence. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 5.56%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 11.90%. Senegal. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 4.30%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 13.07%. Tanzania. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 8.30%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 13.97%. Tonga. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 6.45%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 14.44%. Turkmenistan. Non-immigrant restrictions lifted due to progress. Immigrant entry remains suspended. Zambia. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 10.73%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 21.02%. Zimbabwe. B1/B. 2 visa overstay rate of 7.89%. F, M, and J visa overstay rate of 15.15%. The proclamation underscores the President's commitment to secure U.S. borders, prevent admission of inadequately vetted individuals, and encourage international cooperation in addressing security risks. My next Moorish World TV raises questions about Tariq Nasheed and the FBA movement. Source: Moorish World TV, YouTube, program host Taharkabe. In part 1 of a 2-hour broadcast on Moorish World TV, Host Harkabe presented an extended critique questioning whether media personality Tariq Nasheed functions as a political grifter whose messaging may work against the long-term interests of Black people in the United States. The program framed its discussion as an examination of patterns, marketing strategies, and psychological influence rather than a personal attack. Harkabe opened the broadcast by apologizing for a delayed start and encouraged viewers to share the program, describing it as an educational presentation that would introduce what he called new receipts. He emphasized that the purpose of the show was to allow viewers to reach their own conclusions based on the information presented. Central premise of the broadcast. The central question posed in part 1 of the program was whether Tariq Nasheed should be understood as a con artist. Harkabe stated that there was, in his view, a strong possibility that Nasheed fits this description, but stressed that the audience would ultimately decide. According to the host, recognizing a con artist requires identifying behavioral patterns rather than focusing on individual statements. He argued that Moorish World TV exists to document and analyze such patterns over time, particularly when public figures repeatedly shift identities, narratives, or branding while maintaining similar methods of influence. Claims of psychological manipulation. Harkabe asserted that Nasheed's earlier work, particularly his so-called Mac lessons, demonstrated an understanding of persuasion techniques that he now allegedly applies to political organizing through the Foundational Black Americans, commonly referred to as FBA movement. The host argued that FBA operates as what he described as a con game that targets sincere people searching for identity, belonging, and political direction. He claimed that the movement relies on emotional triggers, simplified slogans, and repetition rather than structural solutions or material outcomes. Throughout the segment, Harkabe repeatedly characterized the FBA project as a rebranded continuation of earlier commercial ventures associated with Nasheed, rather than a fundamentally new political movement. Pattern of rebranding and merchandising. A key theme in part 1 was the idea that Nasheed frequently changes public personas while maintaining the same underlying objectives. Harkabe cited Nasheed's transitions from relationship advice branding to cultural commentary, music promotion, and political activism as evidence of a consistent pattern of rebranding. According to the broadcast, older products, books, and media associated with previous personas remain available for sale, suggesting that newer political messaging supplements rather than replaces earlier ventures. The host described this as a hallmark of long-running con operations, in which new narratives are layered onto existing commercial structures. Allegations of cosplay politics. Harkabe introduced the concept of political cosplay to describe what he claimed was performative activism. He argued that Nasheed adopts visual styles, language, and symbols designed to resonate emotionally with audiences, without demonstrating consistency in ideology or lineage. The host further claimed that FBA functions as an organized movement without formal documentation, driven by a central figure who controls narrative direction. In this framing, supporters were described as participants in a performance rather than members of a transparent political organization. Division versus unity. Another major argument presented in part 1 was that political unity rhetoric has become less profitable in the online media economy, while division generates sustained engagement and financial support. Harkabe argued that earlier eras of Pan-African or unity-based messaging were monetized until interest declined, after which more divisive frameworks became financially advantageous. According to the broadcast, FBA represents a shift away from global Black unity toward a narrowly defined national identity that discourages collaboration with Black populations outside the United States. Broader context and framing. Harkabe placed his critique within a historical context, suggesting that Black political movements have frequently been studied, influenced, or redirected through data-driven psychological analysis. He argued that modern social media platforms amplify these dynamics by rewarding emotionally charged content over long-term organizing. The host stated that the purpose of Part 1 was to establish a foundation for further evidence and analysis to be presented in the second part of the program, including what he described as documentation supporting his claims. Conclusion of Part 1. Part 1 of the Moorish World TV broadcast concluded with Harkabe asserting that Tariq Nasheed operates primarily as an actor and marketer rather than a principled political leader. He maintained that FBA should be critically examined as a commercial and psychological project, not accepted at face value as a liberation movement. The host emphasized that viewers should question public figures, examine inconsistencies, and evaluate whether movements produce tangible benefits or primarily generate revenue and influence for their leaders. This report summarizes the claims, arguments, and framing presented in Part 1 of the Moorish World TV broadcast, and does not constitute independent verification of the allegations discussed. Subject: infiltration methodology, identity redirection, and ideological cosplay. In Part 2 of the reviewed video, commentator Tariq expands his argument that infiltration of liberation-oriented movements is a long-standing and repeatable methodology, not limited to any single community. He states that organizations perceived as potential threats to dominant power structures, whether African-descended or European, are subjected to the same processes of monitoring, entry, and redirection. According to Tariq, infiltration is not primarily designed to destroy organizations outright. Instead, he argues that the central objective is to confuse direction, disrupt clarity, and alter how people understand legitimate paths toward liberation. He emphasizes that remnants of organizations are often intentionally preserved, while their ideological compass is distorted, leading to fragmentation and internal conflict. As a case study, Tariq references the Moorish Science Temple of America, which he argues was infiltrated and manipulated in a manner that resulted in numerous factions and widespread confusion regarding the original teachings of Prophet Noble Drew Ali. He maintains that this fragmentation has caused misrepresentation of Moorish identity, allowing opportunistic actors to promote distorted interpretations disconnected from the original doctrine. Tariq asserts that infiltration functions through proximity rather than opposition. He describes it as the placement of individuals who monitor collective sentiment, analyze behavioral patterns, and anticipate future actions, with the intent to later redirect movements away from effective outcomes. In this framework, he characterizes contemporary identity-based movements as redirections rather than organic developments. A central theme in this segment is what Tariq refers to as ideological cosplay. He uses this term to describe the practice of adopting cultural symbols, language, clothing, and liberation rhetoric to gain trust within conscious communities. According to his analysis, such performances are not expressions of genuine alignment, but strategic efforts to build credibility before steering movements toward less threatening positions. Tariq draws parallels between multiple figures within the broader conscious community, arguing that the same entry techniques are repeatedly used: public association with African heritage, symbolic gestures, travel narratives, and selective invocation of Pan-African language. He suggests that these actions function as confidence-building measures rather than evidence of authentic commitment. The report further outlines Tariq's claim that identity labels are repeatedly introduced because they are known to provoke emotional engagement. He argues that people of African descent have historically been responsive to externally imposed and internally debated identifiers, making identity a reliable entry point for manipulation. In his view, new labels succeed not because they resolve structural issues, but because they resonate with unresolved questions of belonging. Tariq contrasts this with Pan-Africanism, which he describes as a historically consistent philosophy that directly confronted imperialism and white supremacy on a global scale. He argues that, unlike narrow identity frameworks, Pan-Africanism sought unity across borders and emphasized material, political, and economic coordination. In this segment, Tariq also alleges that selective enforcement of ideological standards, including the misuse of the concept of a code, functions to police behavior within movements while shielding influential figures from accountability. He frames this as another mechanism of control that preserves hierarchy while discouraging independent analysis. Finally, Tariq concludes Part 2 by reiterating that infiltration succeeds when it is subtle. He argues that effective infiltration mirrors the language, priorities, and emotional concerns of the community it targets, gradually redirecting focus rather than confronting it directly. According to his assessment, this process results in long-term confusion, internal division, and ideological dilution that can persist for years through reinterpretation and repetition. This concludes the separate report for Part 2 of the Tariq video, focusing specifically on infiltration methodology, identity manipulation, and the strategic redirection of liberation discourse. Ideology, the misuse of the code, and the question of leadership. In the third and final segment of the Taharkabe video under review, the discussion shifts from historical framing and infiltration theory to a more detailed critique of ideology, language, and leadership within contemporary Black political movements. Taharkabe argues that the effectiveness of infiltration depends not on force, but on fluency. Fluency in language, culture, and liberation rhetoric. According to Taharkabe, successful infiltration requires mastery of the very talking points a community uses to define itself. He explains this by analogy, stating that infiltration into China would require fluency in Chinese language and culture, and that intelligence agencies historically deploy individuals who can pass undetected because they share physical appearance, speech patterns, and cultural familiarity. He claims that similar techniques have been used globally, including in the Middle East during conflicts involving Iraq, where local-looking intermediaries allegedly facilitated regime change. Taharkabe emphasizes that popularity and visibility should not be mistaken for legitimacy or long-term strategic success. He states that popularity may win short-term battles, but it does not determine the outcome of a broader struggle. In this context, he challenges the idea that street credibility equates to political credibility, particularly when, in his words, formal legal documents and recorded interactions contradict public perception. A central focus of this segment is Taharkabe's critique of the concept of a so-called code of conduct as promoted within certain movements. He argues that this concept has been selectively borrowed and distorted from the work of Neely Fuller Jr., whose definition of racism centers on a global system of predatory control by one race over another for economic, political, social, and psychological advantage. Taharkabe asserts that, under Fuller's framework, the code is meant to identify and confront systemic racism, not to redirect frustration toward other oppressed groups within the African diaspora. He argues that attacking Haitians, Nigerians, Somalis, or other African-descended communities constitutes a violation of the original code, not adherence to it. In his analysis, such behavior benefits the very system the code was designed to dismantle. The report further notes Taharkabe's claim that coded language and identity fragmentation function as psychological tools that maintain existing power structures. He argues that acronyms and narrowed identity labels obscure lineage, disrupt historical continuity, and foster internal conflict rather than collective accountability. He contrasts this with what he describes as true lineage, which traces identity beyond the plantation era and reconnects individuals to a broader historical and geographic context. Taharkabe also addresses leadership and accountability, rejecting the notion that movements without formal leaders are leaderless. He argues that influence naturally creates hierarchy, and that individuals who define terminology, set boundaries, and monetize symbols function as de facto leaders, regardless of whether they accept responsibility publicly. According to him, denying leadership while exercising control allows individuals to avoid accountability while benefiting financially and socially. Another key argument presented involves compensatory action, a principle Taharkabe attributes to Fuller's framework. He states that meaningful action should focus on economic power, policy advocacy, and community building. He questions whether contemporary movements meet these criteria, asserting that symbolic actions without institutional engagement do not constitute genuine advocacy. In closing, Taharkabe frames his analysis as a call for awareness rather than division. He emphasizes the importance of recognizing behavioral patterns, historical trends, and ideological shifts over time. According to his concluding remarks, understanding these patterns allows communities to resist manipulation, avoid cyclical conflicts, and move toward coordinated, justice-oriented strategies. This third part completes the analytical arc of the video, moving from claims of infiltration, through ideological critique, to a broader reflection on leadership, language, and long-term collective goals. My next news is...
Yeah, man, one. So I was watching a video yesterday, and I saw part of a video. I don't know if it's a new video, man, but I saw one of these guys is making lots of historical videos about black people in Africa and all those stuff. But he had then this Professor Small. Let's hear what he said, man. It's like he said he's distancing himself from the FBA movement and ADOS. I don't know if it's an old video or a new video, because I also got videos from 2016, 2014 from a so-called black community from back then. But anyways, let's check this video quickly, man. Where do I got this? Yeah, man, over here.
I am not ADOS.
Let's hear it, man.
I am not FBA. I am not ADOS. And no matter how long you've been in the Americas or anywhere in the world, we came here from Africa. And anyone who wants to foolishly give up the identity of their grandmothers and grandfathers and their great-parents, I feel sad for you, because slavery and colonialism have impacted you in a greater way than we even think. And yet all of us have been...
And that's what I was saying in the videos. Like, how can you come out in my culture, where I come from, we're not allowed to ask for reparation. Our God will deal with it. We have a treaty from 1760, 1620, like I've said in many videos. But anyways, if you would go out there